Hello everyone, this is Zooc, and today I'm bringing you a bit of a special kind of video. In this one, I'm going to be redesigning the new layouts for the TGS podcast, well, the co-optional podcast, formerly known as the TGS podcast. TGS has recently been through an overhaul of their branding. They changed logos, they changed names, they changed colors, kind of everything pretty much, a complete overhaul. And along with that came the changes for the TGS podcast, since it can't really be called that. So of course the name was picked. Regardless, it doesn't really matter to me whatsoever. But Maker Studios, the people that own the game station, came with their own designer and made these overlays for the podcast. Now, I don't want to rip on Maker because, you know, it wouldn't be nice. But I think it could have been done a bit better than this. Like, they're not completely hideous or anything, but there have been complaints about the contrast being too jarring, the light blue being a bit too powerful, too like tiring to look at. The background and the design elements don't really match. You know, the background is kind of sharp-ish. The boxes are kind of smooth and have rounded corners a bit. So there's a little bit of inconsistency in the design. So Total Biscuit asked me to work on it for a little bit and come up with my own concept. Now, I've always been a fan of simplicity. In my opinion, these overlays contain a bit too many lines for kind of no reason at all. Some of the lines going into it. Lines going into the logo, which is a big no-no. Like, the logo is complex enough. The logo they came up with basically has 3 elements, which is kind of against the rules if you were to look at it that way. So you have the headphones in the co-optional, you have the symbol for the podcast in the I, and then you have the microphone in the P. That's a bit too many. Usually with a logo you want to stick with one, and if it has a double meaning, then sure. But co-optional podcast doesn't really have a double meaning per se. It's not like you know, Fuzzy Hippo. Okay, Fuzzy Hippo Company, it can be, I don't know, fluffy winter clothes, or, I don't know, safari gear, and it can also be a fuzzy hippo. Worst example ever to pick, but you know what I mean. It's about dual meaning in the sense of the actual words or the term in the logo. Well, this one doesn't have that, but you know, the logo was established. That's final. It's not my business. My business is the layout, the overlay. I decided to go with blue because blue always fits. Blue is kind of a very popular color nowadays with gamers and YouTubers and such, and Polaris uses blue in their color scheme, albeit it's light blue, but I just don't like light blue. It's just a personal preference thing. I've always been kind of, you know, I just think it fits like certain situations, and if you want to go friendly and vibrant, you know, pick orange. Orange always fits. Orange is like one of my favorite colors, and it's pretty much a color that I can almost always recognize. As I previously said, I'm a bit colorblind, so some colors I have problems recognizing. Some shades of brown, not shades, but tints of brown and orange. Also, certain tints of brown and green I have problem recognizing. Between orange and green, sometimes there's a little bit of confusion. Now, purple and blue, I have a few issues there. It really depends on the shade of the color itself. Past a certain shade, yeah, I have no problem distinguishing it too. But when there are tones that are very close to each other, like, you know, blue with a bit more red, then I see it as instantly purple, which it might necessarily not be. Or purple with less red, I see it as blue when it's in fact still purple. Anyway, doesn't matter. Basically, there are three kind of screens needed. One is the 4 slot for the most of the talking. One is the one with the video screen, which in which trailers are played and various game footage is played, and another one that was a recent development was the spoiler warning, which is basically just a symbol that's put over the 4 slot slate. So I went with a very popular symbol, I guess. It's the Space Invader. I just took it off Google Images and made a pattern out of it and just overlaid that over the whole thing. Played a bit with some dither effects. Well, there's only one really, which basically promotes like smoother gradients in Photoshop, because there's a problem with banding when you see like various when you build a gradient. and you see the bands of color, you know, from transitions from one color to the next. They're very abrupt. So to avoid that, there's something called dither, and there's plenty of tutorials on the internet how to fix your banding. There's actually a website called nomoorebanding.com. So there's not really much else to talk about. I mean, it's I just wanted to show you guys like kind of how I work. Really, it's a lot of trial and error as per usual, but people are very fascinated by Photoshop in general, and every time I post a video about Photoshop, I get like, make a tutorial. There's really not much of a tutorial that I can make. Like my work method is very basic. You know, it's all about using basic methods. Like some commands I still don't know, you know, some keyboard shortcuts I don't know. There's plenty of things that would probably make my workflow much faster, which I don't know yet, but I do them by hand. You know, I play around with brushes sometimes, and instead of using the gradient tool, I just use a brush and then erase what I don't need. Stuff like that, you know, can be avoided through proper technical knowledge of the program, but I don't have that, and I don't have the patience to learn it, but I know what tools to use to obtain that effect eventually. So I wanted to go for a sort of a clean, very subtle gradient in this particular set of layouts, mainly because, you know, I mean, gradients are kind of fading out of fashion nowadays. Gradients used to be a big thing many years ago, but there were these insano gradients, like from yellow to blue, you know, stuff that you don't really do nowadays unless you don't want to be taken seriously. And then there was Web 2.0, which brought back gradients in a very clean and very aesthetic manner. But now, as you see, a lot of companies are moving away from gradients. Companies such as YouTube, Google, etc. All these big companies are going very flat. You know, even Apple, which is famous for the fact that it uses gradients a lot. In iOS 7, I believe, it uses very flat colors, very basic tones. You know, nothing really fancy about it. They use a lot of negative space. So it's all about design trends. But for stuff like this, for gaming related stuff, gradients are always nice because, you know, shiny, it attracts the eye. But I wanted to make something that isn't very difficult to look at for 3 hours, because that's basically what it comes down to. Light blue is kind of annoying to look at. You know, bright colors in general are kind of annoying to look at. If you sit there and look at like light blue, yellow, a lot of light orange, you know, pink, stuff like that, it's very tiring to the eyes. We relax better when we look at dull colors, like, and dark colors, you know, black, dark blue sometimes, depends on the shade, you know, brown. Pastel colors are easy to look at, but I hate pastel colors personally because I can't distinguish them due to my issue. But dark blue is always a safe bet, and there are certain shades of blue with a lot of like gray in them that I prefer using when possible. So I went for a more subtle gradient and very simplistic, really. Like, it doesn't need fancy shit, you know. Basically, the practical purpose of this entire thing is to have something aesthetically pleasing to look at, but at the same time not steal attention from the faces. You know, you got 4 faces to look at. That's already more elements on the screen than what we can actually pay attention to. You can't really study 4 faces at the same time. You know, you can barely study 1, and it's micro expressions, let alone 4. So if that's if even you look at the screen. If you don't look at the screen, then it doesn't really matter. But a lot of people do look because they, you know, sometimes broadcast trailers and whatever. So it's kind of important that you don't dislike what you're looking at. I personally like this. Like, everyone that I showed them to was very fond of them. But again, the only reason I did them was because there were complaints about the current layout. So I'm not trying to rip on the Maker Studios graphic designer. I'm sure he put some work into it. But you can always do better. I think the whole thing was kind of rushed a bit because they were kind of trying to get it out as soon as possible, and so they might have not put as much effort into it. And also, a thing that I found weird was this geometric background that they have in the new layout is, I think, taken from Google Images. I mean, I searched for geometric wallpaper, and it was like in the first 10 images, or it was something that was almost identical to this. So that's generally not good. Taking your images off Google is not the best thing, because everyone in the world searches on Google first for their images. So it's always good to make your own, or use certain pieces of various images, combine them into something that can't be traced. You know, it's kind of a douchebag move, but it saves time a lot of times. You can't like sit there and make your own wallpapers and backgrounds. It would be insane. So yeah, I have like thousands of wallpapers downloaded, which sometimes I combine it to make something completely different. Most of the time I look at them for color schemes and gradients, because some wallpapers have some really cool colors that would take a bit of trial and error to discover. And so, you know, when I see a gradient that works, I just sample the colors from the wallpaper or the image and just use them as they are. So anyway, this is going to be it. I hope you enjoyed it. It's just a little insight into a different part of my work, because usually I make logos, which is very vector based, but this is more Photoshop focused, which is, I know some people prefer Photoshop a lot to Illustrator. It's more easy to pick up. And please rate that shit if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys for my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.